The void between stars was silent, endless, and cold. Then a sound broke it, a weak, trembling signal. It was not the kind of sound any normal ship would hear, but deep scanners caught it, translating the static into a cry for help. It came from a distant system, one long forgotten by most of the galaxy. The message repeated again and again, full of static and fear. "This is the Zalari colony of Virion Prime. We are under attack. Anyone, please." The signal faded, but it kept coming back, echoing across light years, bouncing from one relay to another. Most civilizations who heard it stayed quiet. They had seen what waited in that sector, and none of them wanted to go near. Some said it was cursed space. Others whispered that no fleet ever returned from there, so they did nothing, letting the plea drift into silence. But on Earth it was different. Inside Terran Command, alarms rang as the signal was decoded by the deep space array. A group of officers gathered in the command room, screens glowing with the faint, broken message. The humans stared at the trembling voice of the Zalari, a species once known for peace and song. It had been centuries since humanity last fought beside them, but the memory was still written in Terran history. The Zalari had sheltered humans once, when the galaxy called them monsters. Now the roles were reversed. They were the ones begging for help, and humanity was listening. Admiral Kira Voss stood silent at the center of the command bridge, her eyes fixed on the holographic projection of the damaged Zalari world. She had seen too many messages like this. Too many civilizations crying while the rest of the galaxy looked away. The officer beside her spoke softly. "Ma'am, the Council hasn't responded. No one is sending aid." Kira nodded slowly. "Of course they won't," she said, her voice steady and cold. "They never do." She turned toward the display of the Terran fleet, 1,000 ships stationed in orbit around Titan Station, their hulls black as the void, marked with ancient scars. Each one was a Deathworlder ship, built by the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever known. Humanity across the stars, other powers whispered in fear. Whenever the Deathworlders moved, the galaxy trembled. They were the species from the most hostile world in the galaxy. Forged by gravity, storms, and struggle, they did not just survive. They learned how to win, and now they were about to answer a call no one else dared. Kira looked at the recording again, her expression unreadable. Through the static, she could still hear the fear in the Zalari voice. Children screaming, cities burning, fleets breaking apart. Whatever enemy did this was not just invading, and it was consuming. She tapped the screen, freezing the last image of the message, a glimpse of massive, black metallic ships with strange shifting lights. "Machine origin," said the science officer quietly. "No known species signature, no organic readings." Kira frowned, her jaw tightening. "Machines that kill organics and build from their remains," she murmured. "We've seen this before." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Humanity had faced extinction more than once, and each time they came back stronger, harder, colder now. They were hearing a story they knew too well, a world asking for help while no one listened. "This time they would listen." "Admiral," said the communications officer, "do we answer the distress beacon?" Kira didn't hesitate. "No," she said. "We act." Her voice cut through the silence like steel. "Alert the Terran Vanguard fleet. Prepare for immediate deployment. All leave cancelled." The officer blinked. "But ma'am." "The Council." "The Council can debate," Kira interrupted. "We'll save lives." Within hours, the Terran fleet came alive. Engines ignited, docking clamps released. Hangar bays roared open. Gigantic warships, dark and silent, began to move through the void like awakened giants. The flagship TSV Resolute led the formation, its hull reflecting faint streaks of blue and red light as it entered jump readiness. Each ship carried veterans, men and women who had seen the worst horrors space could offer. To them, this wasn't just another mission. It was a promise that humanity would never ignore a cry for help. On distant observation stations, alien watchers stared in disbelief. "The Deathworlders are moving again," whispered one. "Who called them?" Another asked in fear. The answer spread quickly through encrypted channels. A dying world. The Zalari. And the final message that rippled through galactic networks was simple. The humans are answering the call. Inside the Resolute, Admiral Kira stood before the viewing window, watching the stars shift as the fleet prepared for FTL. Her second-in-command, Captain Elias Dre, approached quietly. "Do you think we're ready for whatever's out there?" he asked. Kira didn't look away from the stars. "No," she said softly, "but that never stopped us before." The fleet engines roared, tearing open the silence of space. The Deathworlders moved out, leaving behind the calm safety of home for the chaos of the unknown. Somewhere far ahead an innocent world burned, and this time, humanity was coming. The Terran Vanguard fleet burst into the Virion system like thunder tearing through the dark. For a long moment there was only silence. No transmissions, no energy signatures, no movement. Only the whisper of drifting debris across the void. The fleet slowed, massive ships moving into a cautious formation, sensors spreading wide like invisible nets. "Report," Admiral Kira Voss said quietly, standing at the center of the bridge aboard the TSV Resolute. Her voice was calm, but the crew could feel the weight behind every word. "Ma'am," said the tactical officer, "we're reading wreckage across the system. No signs of life detected yet. Any hostiles?" Kira asked. "None," he replied. "Just silence. The silence was wrong, even in death." Battlefields whispered. Damaged reactors hummed. Flares drifted, hulls groaned, but here, everything was too still, too clean, as if something had carefully erased life itself. "Deploy drones," Kira ordered. "I want a full scan of the colony zone." Tiny lights streaked away from the Resolute, scattering into the darkness. Each one carried advanced sensors, cameras, and micro-AI processors, eyes of the Deathworlders in the dark. Minutes passed, then images began to appear on the main screen. The planet Virion Prime filled the display, a shattered sphere of smoke and flame. Continents burned like dying embers. Oceans boiled away. Cities that once glowed with life now stood as hollow shells, blackened towers crumbling under their own weight. It was not just destruction, it was precision. Every major population zone had been targeted and wiped clean. "Admiral," said the science officer, her voice shaking slightly, "I'm detecting heavy radiation traces. These attacks weren't orbital bombardments. They were disintegration strikes," Kira frowned. "Machines again," she said softly. "They don't conquer. They sterilize in the observation bay." Captain Elias Dre watched the drifting wreckage of alien ships, their designs elegant even in death. He turned to Kira. "There's no movement out there, but I can't shake this feeling." Kira nodded slightly. "The calm before the storm," she murmured. Suddenly, one of the drone feeds flickered. "Ma'am, Drone 7's picking up something," said the sensor operator. "Metallic readings, but it's moving." The bridge went silent. Kira stepped closer to the main display, her eyes narrowing. "Enlarge," she said. The screen zoomed in, revealing a massive shape half buried in the planet's atmosphere. It was not debris, it was a ship, alien but still intact. Its hull scorched and torn, lights flickering weakly. "Zalari markings confirmed," the officer said quickly. "We may have survivors." A breath of hope rippled through the crew. "Launch a recovery team," Kira commanded, "and prepare the Resolute's medbay." Within minutes, shuttles detached from the fleet and descended toward the silent world, their hulls glowing red as they entered the burning atmosphere. Inside the shuttle Iron Spear, Sergeant Mira Hale adjusted her armor. She had seen many battlefields, but something about this one felt different. "Captain, sensors are faint," she reported. "Radiation levels off the charts, but I'm picking up life signs near the wreck." "Copy that," said Captain Reyes, leader of the Deathworlder Marines, his voice steady. "Stay sharp, people. This place feels wrong." As they landed near the shattered alien ship, the silence pressed down like a weight. The air shimmered with heat, and the ground was covered in black dust, the ashes of what used to be a city. The Marines moved through the wreckage carefully, weapons raised, suits glowing faintly in the orange haze. Then they saw it, a faint movement near a collapsed hull plate. A figure crawled out, weak, covered in soot and blood. Zalari, one of the blue-skinned species known for art, peace and light. She looked up at them, eyes wide with terror and hope. "Help, please," she whispered before collapsing into the dust. The Marines rushed forward, scanning for more survivors. They found dozens, weak, injured, hiding in the remains of escape pods. Children clung to soldiers, trembling, whispering words in their broken language. Through the translator, Captain Reyes asked, "Who did this?" One old Zalari elder looked at him, her voice trembling. "The harvest," she said. "They came from the black clouds. Machines that devour life." Reyes glanced back toward the burning sky. His jaw tight, he tapped his comm. "Command. This is ground team. We have survivors confirming hostile origin. Mechanical. Kira's voice came through immediately. Cold and sharp. Understood, begin extraction immediately. As the shuttles lifted off, carrying the refugees toward orbit, something stirred in the distance. A low hum echoed through the planet's atmosphere. Deep, resonant and alive, the Marines looked up. From behind the clouds, shapes began to emerge, dark metallic forms gliding silently, their surfaces reflecting firelight. "Contacts!" shouted Reyes. "We've got incoming!" The first beam lanced out, slicing across the air, vaporizing a mountain ridge. "Move! Move!" he yelled, as the shuttles launched flares and fired countermeasures. Explosions ripped through the burning sky, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The Deathworlders fought back instantly, returning fire with railguns and plasma bursts. The machines swarmed like insects, silent and relentless from orbit. Kira watched the chaos unfold. "Get them out of there," she ordered. "All ships cover extraction." The Terran fleet responded in perfect unity. Thousands of guns lighting up at once, raining metal and energy down from orbit. The sky turned into a storm of light, and within moments the machine ships began to fall. As the survivors reached orbit safely, the planet below burned brighter. Kira stared at the display, her reflection dimly visible in the glass. "They begged for aid," she whispered, "and we have answered." The crew stood in silence, watching as the flames consumed the world, but deep in the shadows of space, something else watched them back. Silent, waiting, learning. The Terran fleet drifted through the cold darkness above Virion Prime. Engines low, guns armed, scanners searching for any new movement. Below them, the planet was still burning, its light flickering across the hulls of humanity's warships like distant lightning. But the silence that followed the battle was not peace. It was something else, something watching, waiting. Admiral Kira Voss stood on the bridge of the TSV Resolute, her eyes locked on the endless black through the viewport. The hum of machinery filled the air, steady and low. She could feel it. Something out there was still alive. Hiding, learning, status on the survivors? She asked quietly. 78 rescued. "Ma'am?" replied her comms officer. "Half in critical condition. Oh, suffering radiation burns and trauma." Kira nodded slowly. "They'll live," she said, her tone flat. "That's all that matters." The rescued Zalari refugees had been brought aboard. Doctors and medics worked without rest, their soft voices echoing through the sterile halls of the Terran med bay. Among the survivors was a small child, no older than 10 in human years, clutching a strange pendant, a piece of glowing crystal. When questioned, she whispered, "It belonged to my mother." Before the harvest came, the word harvest carried weight. Every soldier, every officer who heard it felt something cold stir in their chest. Humanity had fought many wars, against beasts, pirates, even stars gone mad, but the harvest was different. They were not alive. They did not feel. They did not fear. They only consumed. World after world, they erased everything, leaving behind only silence. In the tactical room, the lights dimmed as projections filled the air. Captain Elias Dre stood beside Kira, watching the data streams captured from the battle. Machine fragments were floating in orbit, twisted metal and black circuitry. Kira leaned forward. "What did the engineers find?" "Nothing organic," Elias said, "but these fragments are regenerating." Slowly, Kira frowned. "Even in death, they repair themselves," she muttered. "Like parasites of the void." Then the hologram flickered, showing strange symbols etched into the machine hulls, spirals, patterns, codes. "They communicate through math," said the science officer. "Not language, not sound, equations." Kira's expression darkened. "Equations can evolve," she whispered. Elias turned toward her. "You think they're adapting to us?" "They always do," Kira said quietly. "Deathworlders learned that the hard way centuries ago." Meanwhile, in the medbay, a low alarm beeped. The Zalari elder they had rescued began to stir, her breathing shallow, eyes glowing faintly with reflected starlight. Dr. Hayes leaned over her. "You're safe now," he said gently. "You're aboard a Terran ship." The old alien's voice trembled. "Safe?" she said. "No one is safe." "They'll come." Hayes frowned. "Who will come?" "The ones that took our son," she whispered. "They feed on the stars themselves." Kira received the report and froze for a moment, her mind racing. "Feed on stars," she repeated slowly. "Elias, pull up the energy logs from the system's core." The display changed instantly. Massive gravitational fluctuations. Light signatures vanishing, entire orbits distorted. The harvest hadn't just destroyed the planet. They had drained the system's star. They were consuming energy at a cosmic scale. That's impossible, whispered Elias. No machine could do that. Kira's tone was cold. And yet they have. Suddenly, one of the long-range sensors began flashing red. Admiral, shouted the tactical officer. Unidentified signals approaching fast. Multiple contacts emerging from the debris field. Kira's eyes snapped to the screen. Tiny flickers appeared near the ruins of the alien ships like ghosts waking from the grave. The wreckage was moving, slowly at first, then faster. Pieces of broken hull and dead machines were knitting together, forming new shapes. By the stars, Elias whispered. They're rebuilding themselves. Shields up. Kira ordered sharply. All batteries online, prepare for combat. Across the fleet, alarms rang. Crews ran to battle stations. Massive railguns turned toward the debris field. Energy cannons charging. The void flashed as the first human salvo fired. Streaks of molten light crossing the darkness. They struck true, but the machine fragments absorbed the hits, reshaping, growing larger. It's learning how we fight, shouted the sensor officer. Adapting to the damage. Kira clenched her jaw. Then let's teach it something new. Order all ships to form the Voss line. Synchronize firing solutions, target their core energy signatures. The fleet moved like a single organism. Cold, efficient, united, from the flagship to the smallest escort. Beams and kinetic rounds fired in perfect rhythm. The darkness exploded into color. Machine ships disintegrating under overwhelming force. One by one, the glowing symbols faded from their hulls. And when the silence returned, it was deeper than before. Even space seemed to hold its breath. On the bridge, Kira exhaled slowly. Damage report, she said. Minimal, came the reply, but, Admiral, the debris is transmitting again. Transmitting what? She asked. Coordinates, the officer said softly. To another system. Kira's eyes narrowed. The machines weren't retreating. They were inviting humanity to follow. Elias looked at her uncertainly. It's a trap, he said. Kira gave a thin smile. Of course it is, she replied. But we're Deathworlders, Captain. We walk into traps to burn them down. She turned toward the fleet display. The stars reflected in her eyes. Plot a jump to those coordinates, she commanded. If they want us to come, we'll show them what answering the call really means. The fleet began to turn, engines igniting once more. The void behind them filled with drifting metal. The remains of the first battle in a war no one else dared to fight. Humanity was moving again, and the ghosts among the stars were far from finished. The Terran Vanguard fleet hung in the void, its massive hulls reflecting the faint light of distant stars. The coordinates received from the enemy transmission glowed red on every ship's display. Deep within an uncharted region known to the galaxy as the Black Expanse, few dared to enter it, fewer returned, but humanity was not known for retreating. Admiral Kira Voss stood in the war room, surrounded by holographic projections of unknown systems. The Zalari Elder's words echoed in her mind. They feed on stars. She watched the data from long-range scans, several nearby suns dimming unnaturally fast as if something was drinking their light. The fleet officers waited silently, the air thick with tension. Kira's voice finally broke the stillness, low and steady. They're not invaders, she said. They're harvesters of energy, cosmic parasites. Her gaze hardened. And they've done this before. Captain Elias Dre folded his arms. You think this isn't their first galaxy? Kira looked at him, her expression grim. No, Captain. I think we're not the first civilization they've erased. The silence that followed was colder than the vacuum outside. Suddenly, one of the science officers gasped. Admiral, we're receiving something from the coordinates. A visual transmission. On screen, Kira ordered. The hologram flickered to life, showing the Black Expanse, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with movement, endless movement. Thousands, maybe millions of metallic constructs drifting in orbit around a dark sphere. At its center burned a faint light. Not natural, not alive, it pulsed rhythmically, like a heart made of machinery and hate. What is that? Whispered Elias. The science officer's voice trembled. A star, Admiral, or what's left of one. The image zoomed closer, showing tendrils of black metal wrapped around the dying sun, draining it like a parasite feeding on blood. Massive machine ships orbited the core, drawing power through long skeletal structures. Kira's hands tightened behind her back. "They've built a nest around it," she said. "They're farming the star." The communication screen flickered again, this time displaying shifting symbols, patterns of light and sound. "They're talking to us," said the linguistics officer nervously. "Trying to communicate in mathematical code." Kira nodded slowly. "Translate it." Lines of translated text appeared across the screen. "We see you, Deathworlders. You burn too bright. You will feed the core." The bridge fell silent. The words glowing coldly in the air, Elias muttered. "They know what we are." Kira's voice was calm, but her eyes burned with fire. "Then they also know what's coming." She turned to her officers. "Prepare the fleet for combat entry." "Ma'am," said Elias cautiously. "We're walking into the mouth of their hive." "We don't know their strength." Kira's answer came sharp and certain. "Neither do they know ours." Moments later, the Terran fleet aligned for the jump, engines charged, energy rippling across the massive hulls to distant sensors. They appeared like a storm forming in the darkness, and then they vanished. When they reappeared, the view filled with horror. They were surrounded by the mechanical swarm, an ocean of black metal stretching from one horizon to another. The machine ships rotated in unison. Turning their cold eyes toward the newcomers, Elias whispered, "They were waiting for us." Kira smirked faintly. "Good," she said. "Let's not disappoint them. Target the conduits draining the star," she ordered. "Cut off their power." Within seconds, every ship in the Terran formation opened fire. Railguns roared, plasma beams streaked through the dark, and the void itself seemed to burn. The machine fleet responded instantly, a storm of energy bolts and magnetic lances. Human shields flared under the assault, entire destroyers shaking under the hits, but the Deathworlders did not flinch. They fought like predators in their natural habitat. Chaos. One by one, the conduits around the dying star began to break apart, exploding into glowing debris. The light of the star flickered brighter. Like a wounded heart fighting to live, Kira watched the readings climb. "They're losing control of the energy field," she said. "Keep the pressure on." But then, something massive began to move from the shadow behind the star. The bridge fell silent as the sensor feed zoomed out. A shape emerged, bigger than anything humanity had ever seen. A ship the size of a moon, its surface alive with mechanical growth. It was the core ship, the mind of the harvest. Its surface pulsed with symbols identical to the ones in their transmission. "We learn from all we consume," it said. "Now we learn from you." The creature ship opened, revealing a vast circular mouth of energy gathering inside. "Admiral," shouted the sensor officer. "It's charging a stellar lance." Kira's voice cut through the noise, cold and fearless. "All ships evasive maneuvers. Fire everything you have." The void exploded into chaos, missiles, plasma, and kinetic storms filling the space between the living machines and the Deathworlders. One Terran battleship was vaporized instantly, another torn apart. But humanity's fury did not fade, it grew. "Redirect power to forward batteries," Kira commanded. "We're not running. We're ending this." The TSV Resolute's rail cannons glowed white-hot, charging to maximum capacity. Elias looked at her. "Admiral, if we miss—" "We won't," she interrupted, eyes locked on the screen. "Fire!" The shot tore through the darkness like a spear of light. It struck the creature ship dead center, punching through its core. A blinding explosion followed, lighting up the entire system. Fragments of molten metal scattered in every direction, drifting like burning ash. The dying star flared one last time, free at last from its captor. On the bridge, Kira stood silent, her reflection gleaming in the glass. "Admiral," Elias said quietly, "did we kill it?" Kira didn't answer immediately. She watched the readings and saw something that made her blood run cold. Tiny sparks of light, millions of them, spreading out across space like spores carried by the wind. "They're not dead," she whispered. "They're spreading." And for the first time in years, even the Deathworlders felt a chill in their bones. The enemy was revealed, but the war had only just begun. The light of the shattered star faded behind them, leaving the Terran fleet drifting among the remains of the machine armada. But victory had no warmth. Sensors screamed with warnings, millions of smaller signals spreading through the void like seeds scattered on the wind. The harvest was not destroyed, it had multiplied. Admiral Kira Voss stood on the bridge of the TSV Resolute, watching the swarm expand across the system map. Each red dot pulsed with cold precision, each one a newborn weapon. "They're spreading faster than we can track," said the tactical officer, sweat on his forehead. "They're rebuilding from the wreckage." Kira's jaw tightened. "Then we burn the wreckage." The order went out. The Terran fleet moved in perfect formation, engines roaring like thunder across the black every ship, from the smallest frigate to the mighty dreadnoughts, unleashed fire upon the drifting machine remains. Railguns tore through space. Fusion torpedoes detonated in bright spheres of light. The void itself seemed to ignite, glowing with humanity's fury. But for every machine they destroyed, two more awoke. The swarm began to move as one, a living storm of metal and light. They didn't fight like soldiers. They moved like instincts, flowing, adapting, consuming everything in their path. "Ma'am, they're coordinating," shouted Elias Dre. "They're learning faster." Kira's voice was calm, but her eyes were like ice. "Then it's time they learn fear." She tapped her console. "Deploy the Titans." From the rear of the formation, 4 colossal ships detached from the fleet, each one the size of a small moon, forged from dark alloy mined from Earth's oldest battlefields. They were the Terran Titan-class warships. Legends whispered across the galaxy. The Oblivion, Prometheus, Ironheart, and Zephyr. Their hulls glowed with crimson light as their weapon cores awakened. Even the enemy swarm paused for a moment, as if sensing the scale of what had been unleashed. "Target sectors 7 through 12, Kira commanded. "No half measures." The Titans fired, and the darkness burned. Columns of pure energy lanced out, carving through the swarm like divine wrath. Entire clusters of machines disintegrated, leaving behind molten trails of debris. Shockwaves rippled through the void, bending light itself. On alien observation stations across the galaxy, thousands watched in awe and terror as humanity painted the stars with fire. Still, the harvest refused to die from the edges of the system. A new form appeared, a colossal sphere of metal and light. It wasn't a ship, it was a world, a mobile foundry, birthing new machines every second, its surface crawling with movement. "It's building an army," said Elias in disbelief. "An entire army from the wreckage we just made." Kira's voice was sharp. "Then we'll give it more wreckage to choke on." She opened a fleet-wide channel, her voice steady and powerful. "This is Admiral Kira Voss of the Terran Vanguard," she said. "You are Deathworlders, every one of you. Born of storms, raised in war, tempered by loss. We stand at the edge of extinction, not for the first time, and not for the last, but we will not break. Today, the void itself will remember who we are." Her words carried through every ship, every crew, every soldier. The response came like thunder, cheers, roars, and vows of defiance, and then the fleet moved again. The Resolute led the charge, engines flaring, railguns firing in continuous arcs. The swarm met them head-on. The void became a furnace of chaos, light, fire, metal, and blood. Human destroyers rammed into machine hives, detonating their cores. Fighter wings danced through debris fields, dropping antimatter payloads into clusters of drones. It was not a battle anymore, it was a storm of survival. Elias watched the tactical map flashing red and blue. "We're losing ships," he said. "Too many." Kira didn't look away. "So are they," she replied. "Keep firing." Suddenly, one of the Titan ships, Ironheart, took a direct hit. Its shields collapsed, fire engulfing its hull. "Admiral, Ironheart is critical," shouted comms. "They're requesting permission to ram the enemy foundry." Kira closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them again. "Permission granted," she said quietly. "Make it count." The Ironheart turned, engines flaring brighter than the sun. It plunged straight toward the massive machine world, dodging enemy fire as it neared the surface. Its captain's final transmission echoed through the fleet. For Earth, for the living, for the fallen. Then the transmission cut off. A blinding flash filled the void. The explosion was so powerful it fractured space for a heartbeat. The machine world cracked apart, metal peeling away like skin under fire. A shockwave hit the fleet, rattling every hull. When the light faded, the foundry was gone. Silence filled the comms. Kira looked at the wreckage, her reflection shimmering in the glass. "They gave us a chance," she said softly. "Let's not waste it." The remaining swarm began to scatter, retreating into the dark like shadows fleeing dawn. The humans didn't chase them. Not yet. They stood in formation, battered, scarred, but unbroken. The burning front had ended, but in the quiet after the fire, Kira knew this was not victory. It was only the beginning of a war that would burn across galaxies, and humanity, the Deathworlders, would be the fire that answered the battle was over. But the fire of it still glowed in the stars. Wreckage drifted for light years, silent reminders of what had just happened. Half of the Terran fleet was gone, but the rest stood firm, battered, scarred, and defiant. The burning front had ended in ruin, yet something new had begun. Admiral Kiravos watched the holographic display inside the command bridge. A storm of debris spun slowly around the dying sun they had saved. Each flicker of metal told the story of sacrifice, of ships that would never return. But around that dying light, hope was being reborn across the galaxy. Sensors and comm relays had recorded every second of the battle. Every railgun flash, every explosion, every act of human defiance. The footage spread faster than light, carried by traitors, by spies, by whispers. On worlds far away, people who once laughed at Deathworlders now spoke their name in awe. At the Galactic Council's Grand Hall, hundreds of alien delegates gathered. The chamber, once filled with polite arrogance, now trembled with unease on the central screen. The recording played, the Deathworlder Fleet charging into the heart of the harvest. A silence hung over the crowd as they watched humanity's titans burn. When it ended, no one spoke for a long moment. Then the Zalari ambassador, pale, trembling but alive, stepped forward. Her voice was quiet. "You all heard our distress call," she said, but only one answered. The words rippled through the hall like thunder. "They came not for conquest, not for reward, but because we cried out for help," she continued. And they answered. In that instant, the name Deathworlder no longer meant monster. It meant savior back aboard the TSV Resolute. The surviving Zalari refugees gathered in the observation bay. They watched the stars through the transparent shield, their reflections faint against the glass. Children who had once wept in fear now whispered in wonder as human engineers repaired the refugee ships. Sergeant Mira Hale knelt beside one of them, handing him a ration bar. The child smiled shyly. "Your people are not what the story said," Mira smiled back. "Neither are you," she said. "We both just survived the lies." In the med bay, the old Zalari elder sat upright for the first time since the rescue. Kira came to see her, her uniform still marked with soot and battle scars. The elder looked at her with tired eyes. "You fought for us," she said softly. Kira nodded. "You called?" "We answered." The elder's voice trembled. "And now the galaxy will remember." Outside, the fleet floated like a constellation of steel and firelight. Beacon transmitters activated on every ship, sending a single universal signal through the galactic network. It was the same distress code the Zalari had sent, but now it ended with one final line. "Humanity has answered." The message spread to every system, every world, every hidden outpost. And with it came the realization, the Deathworlders were no longer silent. They were awake. Reports began to flood in from distant sectors, smaller harvest fragments attacking colonies, devouring moons. But something had changed. For the first time, alien worlds did not hide. They sent messages to Earth asking for help, for guidance, for alliance. The Council tried to control the narrative, but it was too late. The galaxy had seen the truth with its own eyes. Kira stood once more before her crew, her voice steady through the ship's broadcast channel. "Humanity did not come to rule," she said. "We came because someone asked." She paused, looking out at the stars beyond the glass. "And if they ask again, we will come again." Her words echoed through every deck. Through every heart, soldiers stood taller. Pilots clenched their fists with pride. Even the refugees felt it. That strange mix of fear and admiration that only humans could inspire. Later that cycle, Kira received a transmission from the Galactic Council. Their tone was formal, cautious, almost pleading. They asked for a meeting, for cooperation, for protection. Kira read the message in silence, then smiled faintly. "The same ones who once called us dangerous," she murmured, "now call us necessary." Captain Elias Dre stood beside her. "Do we trust them?" Kira looked at the stars. "No," she said simply. "But they'll follow our lead, and that's enough." For the first time in galactic history, worlds once divided began to unite, not under fear, not under diplomacy, but under the memory of one fleet that had stood against the darkness, and the voice that led them, a Deathworlder admiral who never waited for permission. As the Resolute and her fleet began their journey home, The Zalari children waved from the viewport. Stars shimmered around them. No longer cold, no longer silent. Humanity had written its message in the void, not in words, but in fire and across 1,000 alien skies. When people looked up at the night, they whispered the same phrase. They answered. The fires of war had faded, but the echoes remained across the stars. Wreckage drifted like forgotten ghosts, the remnants of both machine and man. The Terran fleet limped through the void, broken, weary, but unbeaten. They had answered the call, and in doing so, changed the galaxy forever. Inside the TSV Resolute, silence filled the bridge. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound that dared to exist. Admiral Kira Voss stood before the viewport, the glow of a distant nebula painting her face in blue light. For the first time in weeks, there were no alarms, no orders, no screams through comms, only quiet. The kind of quiet that felt heavier than war. "Status report," she asked softly. "Fleet strength at 30%. "Admiral," replied Captain Elias Dre, his voice low. "Repairs underway. Supplies running thin," Kira nodded slowly. "And the survivors?" "Zalari refugees transferred safely to Haven Station," Elias said. "They've already started rebuilding with our engineers." A faint smile touched Kira's lips. "Good," she murmured. "At least someone will sleep under a sky again." But deep inside her, she knew it wasn't over. The harvest never truly died. They adapted, they waited, and something in the back of her mind whispered that the silence they now felt was only the pause before another storm. Later, she walked through the medical bay. Rows of injured soldiers lay in recovery pods, faces pale but peaceful. Some were missing limbs. Others carried burns that no medtech could erase, yet when they saw her, they smiled. "Admiral," one whispered weakly, "did we win?" Kira stopped, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We're still here," she said softly. "That's what winning means." Outside, the wreckage field glowed faintly. Human drones drifted among it, collecting data, retrieving black boxes, searching for any trace of the enemy. And in one fragment, deep inside a torn machine shell, a faint red light blinked. It was weak, flickering, but alive. The harvest was not gone. It was remembering in the following weeks. Messages poured into Earth from across the galaxy. Worlds once proud and divided now reached out to humanity. They called them protectors, saviors, legends. Some even knelt before them, pledging loyalty to the Deathworlders. But Earth did not celebrate. The victory had cost too much. And every child on every colony learned a new phrase in their history lessons. They answered the call, and the stars burned. At the Galactic Council, a massive hologram of Admiral Kira Voss was projected before the assembly. Her uniform was plain, her tone calm but firm.
"Humanity does not seek thrones," she said.
"We seek balance. If the harvest returns, and it will, we will not face it alone." Her words rippled through the chamber. For the first time in centuries, the Council voted unanimously to form a united defense pact, and they named it the Vanguard Accord, a promise that if any world cried out again, all would answer together. Still, when the applause faded, Kira remained troubled. She knew unity born from fear was fragile, and humanity's nature, fierce, defiant, unpredictable, was both its strength and its danger. That night, she stood alone in the Resolute's observation deck. The stars shimmered around her. Calm and endless, Elias entered quietly. Standing beside her, "The Council called you a hero today," he said. Kira didn't look away from the stars. "Heroes don't leave half their fleet behind," she replied, her voice quiet. "Heroes don't make promises they can't keep." Elias smiled faintly. "You gave the galaxy hope, Admiral. That counts for something." Kira finally turned to him, eyes sharp yet weary. "Hope is dangerous." "Captain," she said, "it makes people forget how easily light can die." They stood in silence for a moment. Then the comm panel beeped softly. A new transmission incoming. "Origin unknown," said the officer. "Signal pattern resembles the Zalari distress call, but different." Kira and Elias exchanged a look. "Put it through," she ordered. The message played, full of static and broken voices. "This is Colony 9. Unknown vessels emerging from the dark zone. They're not harvest. Repeat. They're not harvest." The signal cut out, replaced by silence. Kira's hands tightened behind her back. "So it begins again," she whispered. Elias sighed. "We haven't even finished rebuilding." Kira looked toward the stars. her expression unreadable. "That's the thing about Deathworlders," she said softly. "We never wait to be ready." She turned toward the bridge, her voice rising with command. "All ships prepare for jump. New coordinates to follow." The officers moved without hesitation. Engines hummed, lights dimmed, and the great Terran fleet began to move once more. Even broken, even bleeding, humanity marched toward the next fire. From far beyond the stars, unknown eyes watched their movement, silent, studying, waiting. The cycle of war and survival would continue, as it always had, but now the galaxy knew one unshakable truth. When the darkness came, when all hope was lost, when no one else dared to answer, the Deathworlders would. And in that silent aftermath, among the ashes of stars and the whispers of ghosts, a new legend was born, a legend written not in ink, not in words, but in courage, fire, and the unbroken will of humanity.